So the big thing is that there's a lot of confusion in our world about this real and ideal stuff. And I think while all of us have some clarity about it, that sometimes largely we walk around in a fog of misunderstanding and unhealthy concepts about real and ideal. And so just let me lay that out. This week we're actually going to be talking about real and ideal identity, right? The physical nature, like in the Dove commercial. I mean, that's just one aspect of identity, but it's a big one, and it's an obvious one. And the rest of our weeks are going to be talking about real and ideal finances and relationships and spirituality and work and all kinds of areas where these things just, come to real life with us. And Karen Stevensen, who a pastor therapist who's done a lot of work with us here at Jacob's Well, is going to be helping me today. But I want to talk first because she makes it seem like I don't know anything, so I want, first bat. But anyway, so here's the problem, okay? And if you want, I invite you to turn over your Sunday papers. There's an outline on the back, and you should have a pen. And you might find that you want to keep track of some things and write down some thoughts. I encourage you to do that. So here's the problem. Our real, that most of us walk around with, is hurtful and it's unhelpful. No, we don't like it. I mean, every time we get confronted with it, we just want to put it away. There's just too much pain there. That's our real. It's hurtful and it's unhelpful. Our ideal, on the other hand, it's impossible. The ideal that we're trying to live up to, that we think we're supposed to live up to, is impossible. Would you agree that that's kind of the situation that most of the time we're walk around with and that the world, puts in front of us? I think it is. So here's the question then that comes out of that problem. How are you going to live with God, with yourself, with other people, if that's how you see yourself? Wounded by who you are, and already defeated in being able to become the person that you think you're supposed to be. I mean, it's a non-starter and a no-finisher. And that's where we're stuck. And that's why God wants to talk about this stuff. That's why we need to talk about this, because that is not what God wants us to be living with. That isn't the baggage of where we are or where we're headed that God wants to put in front of us. And so God wants to help us understand these things and get a little bit of love breathed into all that, a little bit of forgiveness and hope and possibility. As we talked about this on the staff, we found that it was really helpful to be able to visualize this real and ideal conundrum. And we kind of turned it into a continuum, and you'll see it pop up here. It's also on the top of your Sunday paper. But basically, it kind of works like this, is that we have a healthy and an unhealthy version of real and ideal. And we spend a lot of time, the stuff I've kind of been referring to now is that unhealthy version of it. How do we let go of that? How do we get released from that, freed from that, so that we can be in the healthy versions of it? And I'd like to walk you through this, and I invite you to use the space on your outline to maybe write down some of the things that we talk about here. And I really, really encourage you, if other words come to your mind, maybe even very particular words that spring from your experience, write them on there, because this is important for you. This could be great grist for your meal when you get together with group life during these coming weeks as well. So let me go through this. Okay, so if you have this continuum, on the far left you have the unhealthy real. On the far right in the red zone you have the unhealthy ideal, where in the middle there's a healthy real and ideal. Okay, so you sort of see how it goes from unhealthy real to a healthy real, then a healthy ideal to an unhealthy ideal. And let me start way on the left there, this unhealthy real. And the first things we feel about it is when you face that, it just feels negative to you. I mean, this isn't good. It's not a nice place, all right? And along with that comes embarrassment. I'm embarrassed about who I am when someone actually sees me for who I am. And that actually extends all the way to shame. We start feeling shame for the person that we are. No surprise then that we try to hide that person from other people. In fact, that's one of the things that we find is that we feel like it's an unfair comparison. Like I'm being judged for stuff that it's out of my control, and I was born this way, or it's just what I am, or what happened to me. We have those kinds of experiences. And we find that we try to keep this as a secret from other people. I hide who I really am. I do it from everything from makeup to clothes to behaviors to language I use, how I try to be seen in public, all kinds of ways. We try to keep that as a secret from others because of the embarrassment and the shame that's involved. But what's even more insidious is the self-denial that goes on. I try to hide that real self from myself. I don't want to know about it. I try to blind myself. I try to not know and have to acknowledge who I really am, because It's just not a good place. If you swing all the way to the other side, this unhealthy ideal, way over here, okay? Well, what goes on over there? Well, the first thing that we find out is that that place doesn't really exist. It's the ideal, but it doesn't exist. It's fantasy, it's fiction, but yet it's held up as something that we're supposed to embrace and we get to. It's what I call kind of greener pasture thinking. You know, the greener pasture, life is better on the other side of the fence sort of thing. You know, we always think it is. The only reason it really looks better is because it's not where we are. We don't know enough about it to realize what's good or what's bad about it. It isn't really all that great. In fact, I think you often find, don't you have this, when you say, it would be perfect if only I could, and then you do, and you realize that's just another version of imperfect? In fact, it may be worse. You just couldn't see it from where you were. Yeah, so it's not something to chase. Anyway, as a fiction and as fantasy, it's also unachievable. I mean, how can you get it if it doesn't actually exist? And it's discouraging to get there because it is so different and so far away from who I am and how I see myself. And then it constantly is judging, measuring, comparing who I am with it. And I don't measure up to this fantasy ideal that is out there. The girl on the billboard, the superstar, you know, on TV. And then there's a source of this unhealthy ideal becomes a source of envy for us. You know, that's constructive, isn't it? I mean, just kind of feeling like I want to be that and I'm not. Now, the real thing to notice about, you know, between this unhealthy real and the unhealthy ideal is that there is no path between the two. There is no bridge. One is just like way too bad, and the other one is just way too good to be real. How do you go from one to the other? You can't. There is no path from one to the other. Welcome to life, guys, you know? That's what it's all about. I guess some people might say that's the American dream. Well, it's the negative side of the American dream. Okay, but that isn't where we want to be, all right? I think it's good to name it, to label it, to kind of own it. So what's the healthy version of real and ideal, especially as it applies to our identities? Well, first of all, we find that in this healthy real, this healthy evaluation of who I am, I can tell the truth about myself. It's true. I can be honest about who I am, okay? That's a healthy evaluation of ourselves. That means this is a place that I'm able to be vulnerable. I can be vulnerable about this person. Now, there is some embarrassment. You know, you aren't perfect. You make mistakes. You do silly things. You fart when you weren't supposed to. You know, there's embarrassment there. And I would also say there's some guilt in your healthy real. It's because, I mean, we do things that we shouldn't have done. We do things that we're sorry for and that we wish we wouldn't have and we don't want to do again. There's some guilt. But here's the important thing. While there might be some guilt in our healthy real, there isn't shame there. There is no shame. I will not let that have power over me, okay? I can own who I am, and I can work to make it right as best as I can, and I can move on, right? So there's not shame there, and that's a really important difference between the two. It's not focused on regret, right? Notice I didn't say there is no regret. Yeah, I mean, we do stuff in life, just like we feel guilt. We do things that we feel regret for. But I am not trapped by that regret, and I do not operate from that regret. I move on from it, all right? I find ways to release myself from that and, and to keep on moving, which is sort of the next thing, and that is from my healthy real, I can see next steps. I can see where I would move from here to be more the person that I might hope to be, all right? Which leads us to that person I might hope to be, which is a healthy ideal we might have for each other. And some of the things that I think we find there is we find excitement. It's exciting to imagine that. And we see possibility. It opens up, boy, just think what life could be like, how I could be like in a way that actually feels like it makes sense. And it's motivating for us. It isn't defeating. It doesn't judge us. It doesn't measure us. It doesn't tell us how far away we are or how poorly we've done at accomplishing it. It just stands out there and it calls us forward. All right, and while that healthy ideal may not be truly possible, you might not ever get there, that doesn't seem to be a real problem because it feels relevant. It feels like it is an extension of who I am, and while I may never totally realize it, moving towards it seems to be what life is all about. That's that healthy ideal. It serves as a model for your life. It's an encouraging model. It's whole. You know, that greener pasture, that unhealthy ideal, when you really get inside and you evaluate it, you say, you know, I don't think that really works. I mean, you take the Barbie doll, okay, is that a physical, unhealthy ideal? And you find out if a human body was actually constructed that way, that person would probably die in about 10 minutes. You know, there's no place for the internal organs. I mean, what are you going to do? You know, stick them in a leg or something? They're long enough. You know, that doesn't work. The healthy ideal works. And the more you learn about it, you say, wow, you know, I think I can be that person. I think my life would be more what I'm actually trying to be if I was that person. So, you know, I think that's sort of what we experience there. Now, the neat thing about these, while the unhealthy ones have no connection, there's no bridge between them, the healthy real and the healthy ideal, they're butted right up against each other. In fact, it's hard to sometimes find the division between the two. They dance together. And their dance is a dance of confession and forgiveness and of hope. And they move step by step, the ideal calling to the real, and the real answering, and moving in circles and not worrying about always whether they're going forward or backward because they're in the dance together. And that seems what gives everything some meaning. So what's this experience in these different places, right? The experience that we have, and these are maybe some sort of theological ways of understanding it, some God talk. And you know, when you're that unhealthy real, it just feels like condemnation. I'm bad. I'm not worth anything. The unhealthy ideal is the thing that judges us. You know, I don't like it because of that. I want to be there, but all I do is feel judged by it. On the opposite, on the healthy real, is confession and forgiveness. I can admit, I can be honest about who I am, and I can feel forgiven by myself, by other people, by God. And that healthy ideal speaks hope. It speaks hope. Hope that pulls me forward. So who are you? You go from being inadequate in the unhealthy real to being perfect in the unhealthy ideal, and we know perfect doesn't exist. We were never asked to be perfect. In the middle is a space for excellence. Excellence being something we talk a lot about here at Jacob's Well. Very important definition of excellence. It simply is doing the best you can with what you have. And when we live in this world of excellence, of seeking to do the best we can with what we have, and we do those experiments, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, we find that we get called farther and farther forward, and sometimes we find that our bar for excellence is able to creep up and up and up, and it isn't trying to be perfect. That's cool. That's cool. And what happens to us, instead of being paralyzed in our unhealthy real, and like there's this non-existent unhealthy ideal we find in the middle place when we're healthy, is that we grow. That we grow. And that's good stuff. You know, at this point, I want to call up Karen Stevensen. Hopefully I've impressed you enough that make a note that Greg said some good things. Now I'll listen to Karen. No. She's a therapist and a pastor. She does a lot of work with us, like I said. She did our parenting workshop last weekend, actually, and couples workshops and stuff like that. And but what I want to do is, Chris read you a parable a little while ago, and I want to read you another parable. This is a homespun parable, because I think parables are things that Jesus used a lot in order to help us understand some of these little quirky places about life and to take us a little bit deeper. And I think it's fun to kind of come up with some of our own modern-day parables. And we would like a lot more people and a lot more imaginations, by the way, in coming up with some of these. So as you think of them, you know, write them on a communication card, put them on Facebook. In fact, my email address is right beside the outline there. So if you come up with a really good parable for this week, email it to me really fast, and if it's a good one, I'll read it at the end, okay? The challenge is on, all right? So here's another parable. A parable of the real and the ideal. There was a boy who always wanted to be this pro athlete or that rock star or the next Bill Gates. He made long lists of what he should do to be them, but he either couldn't do it or it never worked. He was very unhappy. Gradually, the boy grew into a man and he got married, but always felt badly that he wasn't important enough for his wife, even though she never told him that. And then the man and his wife had a son. He played with the son, taught him to count, helped him to memorize the alphabet, and showed him how to ride a bike and hit a ball. One day, the man's boy had to introduce his dad to his kindergarten class and said, "This is my dad. He can do anything." We'll just let that hang.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Karen.
It's moving. So where to start? You know, he says he has to do this starting with, but do you know what a tough act this would be to follow? Look at all that energy and intensity. To come up now is really quite tough.
You're just trying to lower expectations.
Yeah,
so
let's just calm it down. So earlier in the week, Greg and I were talking about this subject, and I said, sometimes I use the parable of the prodigal son when I'm working with people in counseling. If they're open to talking about spiritual issues and that kind of thing in addition to their counseling. And he said, well, how do you use this? And I said, well, I share the story about this prodigal son who went away and spent all his money and ran around with women and basically just did all the things that Greg was referring to as our regrets in life. He did all those, a broken soul, and he returns home when he's kind of hit rock bottom. He's in the black hole, and he finally comes home. He's got no money, he doesn't have a place to live, and he comes home and he says, I'm so sorry, to his father. And his father's open arms and says, let's celebrate, you've come home, and he's all excited to see him. Now there's this older brother who during these years while this son was gone has been working day by day with the dad, always dutiful and very responsible and feeling, like he's doing the right thing in life. And he goes, well, what the heck? You go and blow all your money and you've lived your life like that, and now you come home and dad goes, great, I'm glad to see you, and I've been sitting here working my butt off and you don't even give me any attention, there's no parties for me. And sometimes I even use this with couples that come in for marriage counseling and talk about how, like, if one had an affair, you can imagine that would be the prodigal, the one who went away from the marriage and has messed it all up. And the other partner oftentimes seems like the older brother, full of righteousness. I'm the one who was here, I love you, I'm dutiful, I've done all the right things, how could you do this? And then there's this father role in the story who says, yeah, I get the whole deal with both of my sons. I see the one who's been righteously angry, this older brother, I see what his life is, and I love him, and it's okay, and you've done the right things, and I care for you. And I see the prodigal. In my mind, working as a therapist, oftentimes we all have a prodigal in us who, because of early trauma in our life, how many of you have ever had early trauma in your life? Stuff that was hard, that gets stuck, and the rest of our life we spend being aware of it because we're coping with it all the time. We're always on survival mode. That's the prodigal son, the one who went off, who just hadn't pulled it all together. And the great thing in the story is sometimes we're the father too. Sometimes we can be the one to see in another human being, I see the story of what happened to you in your life, and I get it why you would have done those acting out things. I can see where you were really vulnerable and broken and you didn't feel good about yourself, and so it makes sense that you tried to get acceptance or tried to get fulfillment in other ways. And sometimes we're the righteous anger one. We're the one who is always pointing the finger with judgment and criticism and saying, well, if only they would get their life together. Or some of us, we look even in our families at people, and they have an uncle who we say, geez, if he would just pull it together.
Brother-in-law.
Yeah. So we can play all the roles, and the story is like a fun metaphor for us to work with. In fact, I like all the stories in Scripture because I'm always asking the question, so whose story am I living right now? That's what the stories are for. Once I can start to work with them as stories, they become kind of deep metaphors of, I'm in the prodigal part of my life. I'm messing up. I feel broken and hurt. And
what I like about that story too is that both of these brothers had their unhealthy ideal. The one thought, if I go party, take all my fortune and I just go party, that's going to be the life. And he finds out it wasn't, all right? It all falls apart, and then he gets stuck in this unhealthy reel, right? Like, I give up, no one deserves me, have me back, I can just hopefully maybe go home and be a slave in my dad's household, that's it. Mm-hmm. The other brother says, no, the idealized real, the unhealthy ideal, he thinks it's healthy, but it's unhealthy, is I'll be the perfect son. I'm going to do exactly what Dad said, and then I should have all the good stuff and everything. And he finds out, well, no, being the perfect son isn't what it is about. And what's neat is then the father in the middle says, no, I'm not going to play that game with either of you. The son who comes back as this unhealthy real, he says, I'm not going to see you that way. You're my son. He says, all that matters is that you were dead and now you're alive. You were lost and now you're found. That's all I need to know. I know what you did. I know how screwed up you are. It doesn't matter. Come to my house. Here's the ring. Here's the coat. We're going to have a party for you because I want you to be equipped and set up to be your healthy ideal, the person, the son that I see you to be. And the same thing with the other son. He says, you don't need to get all, your undies in a bunch over the fact that your brother was gone and stuff like that. You've been a great son. I don't love you because you've been the perfect son. I love you because you are my son. Come home. Let's celebrate together. And I think that's what God kind of tries to do, is to pull us out of those, and with just, God isn't like playing games, isn't pretending we're not something, but really sees us as the people we could be, and invites us to see ourselves that way, and hopefully then to help each other see ourselves that way. We can do a lot in giving each other permission.
And sometimes, though, we have to internalize how God would see us. Like one of the first ways that I internalized how God might see me is I read this quote in a book, and it said, God has your picture on the refrigerator, and every time God walks by, God says, I like that one. And the image was so real for me in the sense of I have kids on my refrigerator, their pictures, and when I walk by, I have this, I just adore them. And I thought, wow, what a great image of this in-between. And my job is to internalize. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, I have to take that in, feel the grace of that, and breathe. You have to breathe. Take a breath. Everybody take a deep breath. I have to breathe and go, oh, that's what you're thinking of me in terms of the real and ideal that's healthy for me.
Right. The problem with that is, like, refrigerators today are stainless steel, and magnets don't work on them, but otherwise. No,
Thanks, Greg.
Was that a good point? You're welcome. So, no, but that sounds like self-talk.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Am I the only one here with an inner dialogue that goes 24/7, that tells me all kinds of stuff? In fact, it has a tendency to tell me all the stuff that's out on the two ends of the spectrum, and not the stuff that's in the middle.
Yeah.
So, how do I get myself to be helping myself realize who God sees me as and who I really want to see myself as, and the person that isn't paralyzed but can move forward? You have an answer for that?
I have thoughts. Sometimes in my work as a therapist, the material that we're working with in counseling is kind of the dark, hidden stuff. This is the stuff you don't want anybody to know, and it's what Greg's referring to as this unhealthy real. I don't want anybody to know about all the past. Sometimes it's the unhealthy ideal. I can never get to where I want to go, and I don't feel like I'm measuring up. And all those thoughts that people have are all hidden and dark. Like, we're not actually working with that in front of people or bringing it in the light where we could look at and go, is that true about who I am? That because these things happened in my life, I'm not good enough, or I'm not okay, or I'm not lovable? Part of what is healing in our work is all the trauma in our life occurs in a very alone part where we're just doing it in our own heads. Is that fair? That's where the trauma resides, and that's where it has so much power. And part of our faith is to say, if it's truth, it's got to stand up in the light. If it's true, it'll stand up in the light. I can bring it into the light, look at it objectively, and go, is that true? And I have to have some people with me who feel safe enough to do that, bringing it into the light and saying, is that true? Because the trauma occurred when I was alone, and the healing, God always uses another person as part of the healing. You don't heal alone. You always need another person that would join you, look at it, and say, no, I'm still good with who you are. It's okay. It doesn't define you. You had these events in your life, but that's not who you are.
So let that be a word from God from you, that you're going to need that person that you trust, that you love, to tell you this, but I'll tell it to you in mass, that all those things in your life that you think you need to hide, that you think are terrible, that make you unacceptable and unworthy, they are not true. They are not the real you, right? Take that to someone. Trust the person that you trust, ask them and say, is this really true about me? Is that all I am? And hear that word of forgiveness and acceptance from that person. And then the other side of it too, say, do I really, in order to be loved and accepted by you, by my kids, by my wife, by my friends, do I really need to be that superstar? Do I need to be that perfect? And let them tell you, no, we want you to be who you are, all right? Let people tell you that. I'm telling you that that is true right now. And I'd be glad to sit down with every one of you and let you know that. But you need to find that person to bring that message home to you. That's God's voice speaking to you.
Greg and I were talking earlier, and I said, yeah, but the bottom line question with your graphic is, how do I get there? Like, that's the real question at this point, is how do I get from this unhealthy real and this unhealthy ideal into the center? And I have a process I want to do with you. So how many of you have ever been through pre-marriage or marriage retreat with me? Yeah, oh, wow, we have a good turnout. So I do an exercise with people that I call true self, and I want everybody to do this with me right now. And the true self is, I want you to think of somebody who in your life you feel like you can be totally comfortable being yourself with. You feel like you're in your own skin, you feel accepted, there's no judgment. You feel like you're safe with this person, you can let your guard down, say whatever you want. You probably are very funny and bright with this person. And I want everybody to think of a name, and then raise your hand when you've got a name in mind. Somebody I'm just totally me around. Raise your hand when you got it. Okay. Got it? Some of you aren't raising your hand. All right. So the true self says that that's this healthy, real, and ideal. The person that you can experience being totally in your own skin around. That's a really good sense of what it would be like to be your healthy self. That's you being you. And do you know how it feels really free? Do you know what I mean by that? Like it feels comfortable and there's freedom there. And one of the coolest things about this is you already have it. It's not like you say, as you're listening to this, how am I going to get in the middle in the green section? I don't get it. I'm always over here and I'm over here. My self-talk takes me down. You already have a healed version of yourself. And it's how you are with that person. So partly in life to recognize, there's one part of me that's totally in the center, totally filled with grace and acceptance. I'm just free. And I already have it. Now, that's what I got to take along with me, is to know, no, I'm already there. Sometimes I fall out of it. Sometimes I go into that brokenness. Sometimes I go into that criticism and self-judgment. But I do know who I am, and it's already a part of my life.
Right, and I can take that into other relationships where I find that I'm not my true self, and try to live that same way, expand that, and surround yourself with other people that you feel like you can be your true self with. And that's an important thing to, there aren't two different people, the people that are in the imperfect, or the unhealthy, and the people that are in the healthy. It's the same person. It's just that, and the one, I have to hide it, and I'm not forgiven, I'm not accepted, and the other, I realize that I was accepted. Instead of chasing these goals that are unrealistic and unhealthy and impossible, I'm going to realize that God has already given me places, and I already have in my own life things that I realize I am set aside with, that do feel important, that do feel significant. I'm just going to, instead of looking over there all the time, I'm going to look at the stuff that is already here in front of me that I'm actually finding meaning and fulfillment in my life, and say, that's where I'm headed. That's a good thing. So, yeah, it doesn't have to change everything. I love, there's two other Bible verses on your outlines there. This one I think is really neat. It's one you hear from me all the time, and you can hear it from me again. The power of God at work within us can accomplish abundantly far more than all you can ask or imagine. And that's God's idea of your ideal. What I like about that is it is for us. It's something that God's going to empower us to do. It's continuous with us, but it's bigger, better, and probably harder than what you would imagine for your own ideal. And I think that's neat, that God has something bigger and better and probably harder than we would ever pick out for an ideal, but it isn't so foreign from us that it isn't something we can relate to. It's shaped like we are. That's a neat thing. And this other one from Psalm 130, we really see God kind of laying out the real and the ideal. I'm just going to read it, and you can take it home and think about it, but If you, O Lord, kept track of wrongdoings, who could stand? But there's forgiveness with you. And because of that, we stand in awe. People of God, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with the Lord there is great power to redeem, to be made new, to try again, to start over. Some pretty good stuff. We got some pretty good help on that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, Karen. You know, as we head towards Easter and start thinking about the real and ideal, one of the things we're going to be doing these weeks is sharing communion with each other, which is a very real thing. It's bread, it's wine, or grape juice. But somehow God says, this is where I am really present with you in a very real way, calling you to something that is ideal. And you know how we do it at Jacob's Wells, we try not to make it into too big of a fuss. We see this as a meal. It is sacred because God says, I'm just going to be with you in some very real ways here. So we invite you, there's 5 tables here, to come and receive it. And, you know, you can serve yourself. You can just get your own wine or grape juice and take your own bread. But I think it's kind of nice if we serve each other. And I encourage you to just use these simple words as you give someone some bread or a cup of wine or grape juice. Just bread and wine from God. This is bread or wine from God. God's in the game with you. So, you know, Jesus said, I'm giving my life for you. This bread is me. It's my life. I'm going to be working within you to bring life to you. And he poured out, the wine into a cup and said, you know, I'm pouring out my life because I love you, and to let you know that there's nothing that's ever going to stand between me and you, or you and the world, or you and God. We're together in all this together. So come, go to the tables, receive these, and talk to people.